Welcome to our city council meeting. Please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilmember Stearns?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Wagner? Here. Councilmember Stackla?
Here.
Councilmember Engstrom?
Here.
Mayor Mortar?
I'm here, thanks. Okay. Before we go to our public comment, I'd like to ask consideration of council members for a 3 to 5 minute presentation sometime around 6:30 by our local CHP commander, Lieutenant Foster. He has a requisite meeting in McLeod that he's attending right now, and he said he'd be here by 6:30. What he'd like to do is update us on evacuation procedures and traffic management on I-5 right now. If you'll agree to do that, what we'll do is we'll finish whatever item we're on and then have him speak and then continue with our agenda. Any objections?
Agreed.
Okay, fine, thank you. Okay, it's time now for public comment for any of those of you who would like to comment on anything that's not on our agenda or is on the consent agenda. And we welcome you to come up and share your perspective for up to 3 minutes. Is there anyone who'd like to speak? Mr. John Kennedy, come on up.
It's been a while since I've been here, so I figured I better come back and introduce myself. John Kennedy in Mount Shasta. You know, here in Mount Shasta, we have quite a unique situation in the city park and Shasta's Park and our sports athletic facilities. They've all been at one time in real good shape, but we've gotten to the point now where money is short and we can't seem to take care of what we got. So coming up, and I'm sure you all heard about it, is Measure P, which stands for Parks. And this is a measure that is going to be on the election when the ballot in November, and it's to raise funds to refurbish the city park, Shasta's Park, the sports complexes that we have, and perhaps add some additional ones like pickleball court, redo the tennis courts, that sort of thing. And anyway, I don't know if the city can voice an opinion as to supporting this or not, but it would sure be nice that we let the public know that we really do need their support. It's going to be a $75 on a improved lot and $40 on an unimproved lot. It's going to be an assessment on each of those properties for the next 25 years. It's going to raise quite a bit of money, but we're trying to get somewhere between $3 and $5 million to redo all the parks and get all these facilities up to date. But anyway, there again, like I said, I don't know if the city can voice an opinion or not towards this, but it sure be nice if we did have your support. Has everybody got one of these brochures? Had read one?
I don't have one.
Okay, I'll leave some here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
John, are you handing those out at the farmer's market as well?
Well, I didn't, but I think somebody went to the farmer's market and there was something about political things that you can't have at the farmer's market.
The other thing, as long as you have the microphone, did you want to announce anything about pears or apples?
Well, I've run out of pears, but I still have plenty of small apples left to sell.
Where can people get those apples?
Oh, at the 709 Rockefeller. We had an apple tree that tipped over, had so many apples, and I got to get rid of them. I hate to throw them away. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other public comment? Thank you. Okay, well, thank you. Seeing none, then, I'd like to move on to council and staff comments. Mr. Pope, would you like to begin?
Thank you, Mayor Mortar. So just a quick update on the Delta fire. It's now at 47,110 acres, only 5% containment. But they do hope to have full containment still by September 22nd. Right on clue. We had some questions regarding the salary survey the city was going to do. We put out requests for proposals, and those bids actually are due this Friday, and we'll be reviewing those, and Muriel Terrell will be bringing those with her recommendation back to the council for consideration. And
I'm
also,
sorry, Bruce, I was paying attention to the train. Which bids are these for?
For the salaries, the city staff salary survey
Ah, thank you.
that the council authorized in this year's budget. So we set that out to get a firm to do it. We're getting bid proposals. We'll be bringing those to you with our recommendation. And additionally, I'd like to comment, Public Works, as you know, has been chip sealing streets, basically from McLeod down to Old McLeod and Mount Shasta Boulevard up to Washington. They completed that on Saturday, all the new oiling. So those streets are all resurfaced and did a very nice job. They were out there all day, did a very good job. We've been talking about the EDA grant that we were putting together, and that will be coming back to you on your meeting the 24th of this month for your approval, so we can submit to the Economic Development Administration for
EDA?
funding,
For which project?
and that will be for a feasibility study for enhanced infrastructure financing districts. So we'll look for that on the 24th.
Will that also consider a CREA district?
Correct.
Okay,
They're
so
both,
EFID
those are both
slash
tax
CREA.
increment finance districts.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, it's good. So, can you just go over that last one again? Because that's of particular interest to me. What is being done right now with respect to the study on the EIFD?
Well, this council authorized us to go out with a proposal, which we did, and we were given permission to go for the grant, I should say more correctly. We're putting that grant application together. That is basically complete. We're doing the final editing now, and we'll bring that for your approval. That will then go to the EDA. We hope to get funded in the range of $100,000 to put together an enhanced infrastructure financing district, and the CREA, which focuses on housing. You have to go through a feasibility study because the district is based on incremental increases in property tax. So you have to have the whole economic base for it that established the district off that base. Out of that, we'll look at feasibility of funding infrastructure projects, housing projects, and in that context, analyze your tax sharing agreement that the city presently has with the county on the landing property.
And so you would have a third party do that study?
That's correct. That's the purpose of the grant, is to hire the third party.
Gotcha, thank you.
So then additionally, we were contacted, we've been back and forth with Rural California Housing Development Corporation, and they came here and looked at a lot of sites. We forwarded information to them, had numerous discussions, and it just kind of dried up. And then the end of last week, they contacted us, said they have landed on a property, and they are putting their proposal together that they'll bring for staff review, staff input, and then we'll be bringing that to your consideration. At this point, they're focusing on property on Pine Street to do affordable housing project. So in addition to that, we have been working again with Danco Development Company that tried to do a housing project here in Ivy, Chestnut, some years ago. And they are now interested in sitting down and see if we can put together a housing program on another piece of property here. So we said absolutely staff would give whatever support they needed to put together some program that would be beneficial both to city and to Danco, then bring it up for consideration through the Planning Commission. So we're working on that. And other than that, I think what we do have, as I sent out to the council today in a report, we've had John Kenny, our city attorney, working on a ordinance so we can address some of these deteriorated buildings and properties in the city. John has put together 2 ordinances. One is for the actual enforcement of the code, and the other is for recovering fees and fining the properties. And so I sent those out early because those are very important ordinances. They're detailed, and so I wanted to give the council added time to review those, to forward your comments to me so I can share them with John and we can get those answered before we bring them up for a hearing. But I would like to try to push those 2 ordinances forward and have them on your next agenda if that's possible. So if you could review those and get your comments to me, that would be greatly appreciated. And the other thing we had working was that Catherine Wilson and I are going to be meeting tomorrow morning to try to finalize our changes to the Thrive Hive landing page. If you recall, the council authorized staff to work with Thrive Hive Company to put together a marketing program designed to attract new residents and people wanting to open businesses here, as opposed to the type of marketing to bring tourists to tourist attractions. So we're working on that, getting it finalized so we can get that out in the marketplace, so to speak. So those would conclude my comments. If the council has no questions, I would refer it to Ms. Lucchese for a comment.
Quick question. The Pine Street property, is that across from the hospital or somewhere else? The Pine Street?
It's just, let's see, just south of Ivy on the north side of Pine.
It's next to the ranger station.
Next to the range, that is
Okay.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Bruce? Okay, other staff comments. Ms. Lucchese.
So really quick, the general plan visioning survey is going to be closing on Wednesday. So any last calls for paper surveys to hopefully have those in, we'll still accept them after Wednesday, but they will not be included in the presentation and packet for Planning Commission consideration for this month. That visioning survey, as well as a recommendation for draft visioning for the general plan, will be brought to City Council is sometime in October, once Planning Commission has had a chance to draft that proposal for you to consider moving forward. The second thing too is we had the City of Mount Shasta was accepted to receive 2 water fellows through the Civic Spark program, which is a joint program between the state of California and the federal AmeriCorps program. It is being facilitated by the local governments commission. And so Derek and Frank are here today, and they'll come up and just do a little presentation here really quick just about themselves. So they started today. They'll be working on a 2-part project here for the next year. They'll be on contract with us. I will be operating as their main supervisor. Sorry, there's like a fly bothering me apparently. So they'll be working with us to redo all of the geodatabase for our water, wastewater, and drainage systems, stormwater systems, actually putting them into electronic data and putting them into some systems so that we can start using kind of more up-to-date information. So the guys in the field after the year will be able to take an iPad and have more up-to-date information on the condition of the lines, where they're actually located, and get a better accuracy on those. The second part is they'll be assisting with the general plan, water resource information, groundwater information, as well as recommendations for small scale and large scale capital improvements projects to improve stormwater and drainage throughout the city.
Small and large scale what?
Capital improvements projects.
Capital.
So they'll be working primarily through my office. They'll be going down to PACE for training on the ArcMap software starting tomorrow, and we'll be gone down there for the next couple of weeks training with PACE to put together that. So I'll just invite them up really quick. If you guys want to come up to the podium, just do a quick introduction, where you're from, what you hope to do.
Good evening. My name's Frank Lyles. Thank you for the introduction. So that's exactly what we'll be working on this year. Our first day was this morning, and we're really excited to be here. So it's nice to meet all of you. A few of you we've met already. I'm sure we'll meet the rest of you over the next 12 months, or I guess we're actually here 11 months, but over the next year. My name is Frank Lyles. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee originally, but I studied water policy, economics and geology in college in Southern California, and I'm very excited to be here and call Mount Shasta home.
Hi, my name is Derek Chung. Thank you again for the introduction. I grew up in Los Angeles suburbs, so I came from the big city and then thought I'd try something new. Studied environmental studies and hydrology, as well as chemistry on the side for my undergraduate degree. So it's really nice to meet you guys and finally call this place home for a little bit. So.
Welcome, gentlemen. God, it's great to have you. We've been hearing about you for months and months, so it's good we're going to kick this project off. Just keep Juliana in line.
We've been looking forward to seeing you. We hope that you'll enjoy your time here in Mount Shasta, and we're looking forward to great progress. Thank you.
Anything else, Juliana? No? Thank you. Okay, council comments. Who would like to begin?
I just had a clarifying question for you, Juliana, as far as council input for the general plan. That when it comes to us on the agenda, that's our opportunity to make comments, or you're expecting that from us before then?
That's a good question. So you guys can operate as individuals and take the surveys and participate in the open comments. You're just like any other individual making that comment. I think the important thing to remember is just to keep it in perspective when you give your comment, if your comment's not in the majority, to maybe kind of take that as trying to be objective as possible when it does get to you. So if we draft a vision that doesn't exactly match what your vision is for the future, maybe remember that there are a lot of other people we're trying to balance when we're putting those things together. But no, I sent out the survey, I think, to everybody, including our commissions and committees, and encourage people to give their individual input. So what it'll look like for you guys in October is the first section of the general plan is determining the 2045 vision of what we would like to see in the future. And so Planning Commission will take all that input from the survey, as well as other information we have from previous documents. Drafting that vision, Planning Commission will have an open discussion, and then it'll be presented to you in a regular meeting for final approval as the draft vision. It's really important for us to establish that early on, because when we start doing data collection and data analysis, that's kind of the context we use to look at the data. So for example, if we're seeing, if we're looking at water data, for example, and we're seeing that there's an increase in water quality issues, but yet the future vision of Mount Shasta is to have very clean water, we need to use that vision to make decisions for recommendations in the final document. So it's really important for me to get that draft vision down and agreed upon from council is just kind of a go forth. That would be great. And the second thing that's going to be presented to you is a scope. And that's basically all of the required elements and goals that a general plan has to have for the state, as well as optional goals that Planning Commission has recommended and placed into that scoping document. For example, we're probably going to recommend adding an optional goal to our land use to discuss urban design. It's not a requirement to discuss urban design and built environment character, but based on conversations that we've had in the past, based on feedback we're getting, urban design is a very important thing here. And especially if we move towards a form-based zoning code, it'd be very important to have that information. We're already preparing some urban design open house and storyboards for people to comment and do that. So that'll be what's presented to you is a series of elements and chapters, the ones that are required so that you understand like these are requirements and this is what you can expect from this plan, as well as recommendations for optional elements. So again, some of the optional elements that I've presented to Planning Commission, which have not been confirmed by them for your consideration, are water resources, economic development, cultural, historical, and public facilities is another one as well. So those will have options, and so you can decide as a council, based on the recommendation from Planning Commission and staff, whether you want to go forward with those elements or chapters or not. It does add to the overall cost and timeline, the number of elements that we have, but it's based on feedback that I've gotten from the council, feedback from Planning Commission and the general public for the past 2 years, and that's why we've included some of those chapters. But ultimately, having a draft vision and draft scope established is going to be good. So anyway, we'll present that to you in October. I can answer more questions, but that's just what will be presented to you. And yes, please, we'll have a number of other public input sessions. Feel free to give your input. So, but again, you're an individual, you are not a council member, so.
So I filled that out, right? That's
Yep.
what we talked about before? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Juliana? Okay, other council comments? Nothing? Well, I'd just like to thank our Public Works crews for facilitating, if not actually doing, the sealing of the chip seal. What do you call that operation? Well, it was chip sealed before, and now it's been oiled.
It's chip seal.
Oh, okay.
All part of the same process.
Okay. Anyway, they look great. The roads look great. And I'd like to thank, of course, our emergency responders who must by now be pretty exhausted, but in whose hands we are, really. They've just done a remarkable job. The stories of which we have not heard yet. I certainly haven't, but it takes grit and endurance and quite a bit of skill and maturity to do what they're doing. And I'd like to thank Kathy for your part and as a volunteer. And lastly, I just want to say that my heart goes out to the businesses who have suffered from what must be a fairly significant reduction in business, both to the hotel, the lodging owners, as well as just the businesses, the retail businesses, every form of business. I'm not looking forward to seeing the difference in the revenues that you have been able to pull in, business people, and I just hope you can hold on, and we'll do what we can to support you. Just want to recommend to people that we shop local whenever possible. Our businesses really need it, I'm sure. We're fortunate to have been just on this side of the detour. I can only imagine what Dunsmuir must be experiencing right now. So anyway, a lot of gratitude for so far having been spared the greatest suffering that some other folks are under right now. That's it for comments for me. I'd like now then to go to the crosswalks, except that our Public Works Director isn't here. Are you going to? Oh, the consent agenda? Gosh, I'm sorry. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, the consent agenda. The city manager recommends approval of the following consent agenda items. All resolutions and ordinances on this agenda or added hereto shall be introduced or adopted as applicable by title only, and the full reading thereof is hereby waived. A, approval of minutes, August 27th, 2018, regular city council meeting. B, acceptance of Brown Act committee minutes, Downtown Enhancement Advisory Committee, July 25th, 2018. C, approval of disbursements, accounts payable 8/30 and 9/6/18, and total gross payroll and taxes for the period ending 8/26/18. D, AB 2788, maintenance of effort and Public Safety, CCR 18-47. E, adopt amended job description for the position of firefighter. And F, receive Police Department August 2018 report. Is there a motion for approval?
Yes, so move, including adoption of or approval of resolution CCR 18-47.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous, thank you. Okay, now, will we move to crosswalks with our Public Works Director, or will you be doing it, Bruce? Or?
I'll take that one, thank you.
Thank you.
So this item is back on the agenda. Basically, the report you have before you is the same report you had before. It has a series of options, and then the question is about what do we do about the crosswalk at Alpine and Mount Shasta Boulevard. We've had anecdotal information to the council that this is a dangerous crosswalk. We have the reporting of a previous study done for the city that says crosswalks are in fact inherently dangerous because it gives a false sense of security. The question before you is what to do about this particular sidewalk when the hard data that you have does not indicate that there's a problem. So you're kind of left with choices, one, to do nothing, in other words, leave the crosswalk the way it is. The other is to remove the crosswalk, take the striping off the street, and then because that at that particular intersection and that crosswalk, that is, the sidewalk is cut for handicap access, so you would have to put in some ballards and some chains to block that area because the way the crosswalk, the curb is cut, it indicates that it would be a crosswalk. So you would want to do that much if you chose to remove the crosswalk. The other is that Rod put together a proposal for you to install a flashing beacon. It would be activated by a pedestrian. It would flash on a north-south axis. It would not be flashing east or west. So the lights are fairly confined and directed. And so you could install that, and you could also look at other alternatives. And the fifth recommendation is you could do more studies and more evaluations. I believe Councilmember Stearns at the last meeting raised a question of what would SCORE, our Small Cities Organized Risk Effort, advise on this from a liability standpoint. We checked with SCORE, and basically they said if you're going to address sidewalks, you need to do it through an engineering study, either the one you have or if you decided to contract for a new one, so you can make your decision based on objective analysis, and it gives you a level of what they refer to as design immunity in case there was ever an accident. So they gave us a referral to an engineering company that does this sort of work, and I personally contacted the company, and they said they could do the work. And the question they would have is, do you want us to study sidewalks in the city? Because we have had comments that the sidewalk at Castle and North Mount Shasta Boulevard is a dangerous intersection also, though there have been no actual incidents, and there are other sidewalks. Or would you want them to only study this particular intersection and the sidewalk? If you selected to have them study this sidewalk, the cost would be probably under $5,000 and would take, I would guess, 30 days to conclude. Then you would have that study. Basically, what they're going to tell you is take the crosswalk out, leave the crosswalk, or put in some kind of warning device, which is basically what you have before you tonight. So You could approve one of the options. You can direct staff to retain an engineering firm to study this one crosswalk or multiple crosswalks.
Thank you, Bruce. Questions of Bruce? Paul?
So without the study, we open ourselves up to liability.
Well, not necessarily liability. If somebody ever gets hurt there, the question then is, what is the causal relationship here? And if you base your decision tonight on the previous study, you have some design immunity.
Which was done how many years ago?
It was 2006.
So somebody could say that study's outdated and we should have done another study.
Somebody
And-
could say that was not a qualified firm also,
Yeah.
whether it was or not.
So you get sued one way or the other if somebody wants to.
Well, you have to identify in a case like that what happened. Now, if a person's in a crosswalk and if they're hit by a car, that's what we're talking about here. If the car comes close, it doesn't count. They don't get to sue anybody.
Right.
But if somebody is hit, injured, or unfortunately possibly killed, then we have legal action before us. And the question, you're in a crosswalk. You have a right to be there. Under the state motor vehicle code, when somebody steps out at an intersection, whether it's painted or not, they have the right of way.
But they also have the right, the person who was hit, to say it wasn't designed properly.
That could be an argument. that could
Because
be
we're
posed.
deeper pockets
They can
possibly.
raise that argument no matter how it's
Yeah.
designed.
You know, I wonder what would happen if we put a police officer there with a radar gun for people coming around that corner for a month. Not every day, but, half an hour a day. I wonder if that would slow a lot of people down.
Well, we had a police officer out there on and off for a period of days, but he was not recording speed, he was recording accidents
Yeah.
or potential accidents and observed none.
Just
The
a thought.
question is, you're asking about enforcement of speed.
Well, it's my opinion that that part of Mount Shasta Boulevard is probably the most dangerous part on the whole boulevard. And it's also my opinion from going through there for 30 years that people neglect the safety factor of slowing down on a curve coming in. I mean, they're
it's a-
going 30, 40 miles an hour.
It's somewhat of a blind curve as you come
Yeah.
around it. I mean, I drive it every day,
Yeah, I know.
but
you
then I know there's a crosswalk there, so I'm not really a good objective analysis. But what you're trying to deal with here is human behavior. Now, human behavior behind the wheel of a car, human behavior when they're walking. Rod and I were going over this report in his office the other day, and it was a nice, clear day. Wind was blowing, smoke was gone, and we sat there looking down at the lake and Shasta Boulevard where there are controls, pedestrian-activated controls, crosswalks, and stoplights. In a matter of 5 minutes, 2 pedestrians walked up, pushed the buttons. It didn't turn for them instantly. They walked right out in front of cars with the big hand saying, "Don't cross." How you change that behavior with legislation, beyond me.
More questions of Bruce? None? How about public comment? Are there any of you in the audience who'd like to share your thoughts? Greg?
I've seen a solution that isn't on your list. Ashland uses it, and also Alameda uses it. And there may be other cities that use it too. And what it is, a pedestrian comes up to cross the street, they press a button, and flashing lights, not only, I mean, you don't have to have flashing lights that might hit neighbors or something like that. The crosswalk lights up. It's hard to miss. You know, it's, I I have no idea what the expense of that is, but that seems to me solves the problem. Also, one thing you've never pointed out with this corner, there's a blinking red light at that corner. Everybody just flat ignores that. When you make the corner and you're making a right past the gallery and you're going towards Berryville, that's a blinking red light. And maybe some enforcement about slowing down or whatever right at that intersection. I mean, there's no crosswalk at that intersection. That's just Chestnut merging onto North Mount Shasta Boulevard. And anyway, just those are my thoughts.
Well, the one proposal that Rod has in here is to put a pedestrian-controlled flashing shielded light. Now, we could investigate the idea of cutting the street and putting recessed lighting in that would light up. But remember, it snows here, and so it's got to be recessed, because if not, the first snowplow would remove them. So we could investigate and report back on that if that were council's option.
Would either of you gentlemen would like to make a comment? Okay. Okay, moving on then to council discussion.
If I may. I appreciate staff getting the additional information to us from the, I think it was 2001 time period. Having read that over, having considered the matter at our last meeting and in preparation for tonight, I think that, I am going to be supportive of the city putting in the RRFB that staff proposed. One of the articles that we received in our packet did indicate that marked crosswalks are appropriate at some locations to help channel pedestrians to preferred crossing locations, but in many cases should be accompanied by other improvements. Those other improvements, I think, would be the RRFB.
Thank you. Tim, other comments? Then I'll jump in. John?
Yeah, so I've just, my drive past that area often, and so I didn't really notice how short the distance is from the curve to the crosswalk until this subject came up. And on the surface, my initial thought would be that crosswalk should never have been placed there at all because of the short distance southbound for around the curve, and that it would have been better placed over by what is now the florist shop at Pedals, and there's a bus stop across the street, so people getting off the bus have a crosswalk to go and shop in Perryville, et cetera, or anywhere along the boulevard on that side. But not being an expert in these things, I tend to like the idea of maybe doing number 5, which would be a study of that area, the current crosswalk, and potentially moving it or leaving it there, and then also taking a look at Castle and Mount Shasta Boulevard. That has actually, from my experience, somewhat treacherous for pedestrians. And if we really wanted to spend some money, also take a look at the crosswalk at Alma and the Boulevard too. So if you really wanted to have an exhaustive study of what I consider the most dangerous crosswalks, because I drive them all the time and different times of the day, that's what I would lean towards at this point.
Sorry, Alma and the Boulevard is a controlled intersection, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is, but it has the flashing light, and I preferred it when it was, from a safety standpoint, being someone who drives a commercial vehicle, when it was a full light, and I think that's more helpful for pedestrians also. It helps make things more decisive.
Okay, thank you. So I was not here at the last meeting, but I'm assuming that what we did was ask for more information. And I want to thank Rod for the volumes of information he included in the package. I also read them. I have an alternative perspective, though I did mark the very same passage you did, Tim. I understand that in previous years, the Public Works Director, the Police Chief, and I think the City Manager walked the streets and decided which ones should be preferred locations to cross. And though I sort of agree with you, John, about that not being a great place, people are going to cross there anyway. So I think we need to live with it at this point. I am not in favor of studying this anymore. We've been bandying this around for a while. I think we should do something about it and monitor it. One of the points that was made was that, in a city, people know where the crosswalks are, both pedestrians and drivers, and they should behave accordingly. In our town, there are many people, as you know, who are tourists, and first-time drivers of the boulevard, or at least haven't done so frequently like many of us have. And I don't think it's a good idea to trust that they will drive slow enough given the dynamics at that intersection that we're talking about. So much of what was quoted in the articles, I think, isn't entirely applicable here. I hesitate to go against, professionals in the field who recommend that you don't do anything in crosswalks, but they did say, you don't do anything to give pedestrians a false sense of security in a crosswalk. But I think in this case, what I'd like to recommend is to follow, I've forgotten which option it is, but to go ahead and put the flashing beacon in. In Parrish's report, he mentions that in both Castle and this intersection, there were 9 pedestrians in the crosswalk or starting into the crosswalk when vehicles didn't stop. That's a problem to me. And the fact, as you point out, Paul, that people are going around that corner too fast. So what I'm recommending is that we do put the flasher in, and that we monitor both intersections again this December, perhaps more thoroughly, and include speed in it as well. We install the flashers, then we monitor it. And then we decide, based on our experience with that, whether or not we want to spend the money to look at the other crosswalks. I agree that Castle is also problematic, and there may be others, to do a larger study. I just think it's time to do something. And no, I didn't recommend doing a study. No, I'm recommending that we put the flashing beacons in, and then we have our police officers and whoever else monitor the activity at that intersection, both speed-wise, which apparently wasn't included last time, the speed on approach, as well as the actual occurrence in the crosswalk.
See if that makes a difference, and then maybe implement it.
Right. Just take step by step.
To the chair. I'm reading this draft report about these particular rectangular rapid flashing beacons. It says, because of their relatively high installation costs and ongoing maintenance costs, their installation should be limited to locations where they're justified after a thorough consideration of vehicle volume and speeds, number of pedestrians, length of crossing, and other relevant factors. So it seems to me that if you want to decide to put in the beacon, that you want to have a baseline data before the beacon goes in, and maybe do what John suggested and really measure those speeds that are coming around and the volume of cars, get some baseline data before the installation. I would think that would be a minimum. And since you missed the meeting last week, what I mentioned was that there is a resident right across the street from Berryville. I was arguing that we really don't need the south-facing light, which would potentially light the front windows of that house. because there's a long, straight road, plenty of time for vehicles to see pedestrians enter the roadway. I was arguing that the north-facing lights were more important. I talked to Rod today. He said they're bidirectional, so it's going to be both on the north and the south side. I also drove through Ashland, and they had a similar device, and actually those LED lights were very light and subtle, and they weren't loud at all. Now, Rod was describing these LEDs as bright, very bright lights, and if there is an adjustment, which he says in the specification, there is an adjustment that we can do. It's a temperature adjustment. In the specification, it goes from minus 50 degree F to 122 degree F, that we consider trying to lower that as much as possible, just because there is a resident nearby. I'd want to keep that light noise down, I think, overall.
Any other thoughts?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the installation of a rectangular rapid flash beacon at the Berryville crosswalk site, and as suggested by staff at the last meeting, to have that warning signal before the turn of the Mount Shasta Boulevard as well. So that's
And
my
would you
motion.
consider an amendment to include the monitoring afterwards?
Absolutely. And to
Before and after?
Huh?
Monitoring before and afterwards?
monitoring, and I would fully expect there to be monitoring afterwards, but I'm willing to make that part of the motion, yes.
Is there a second?
And technically, it's not at Berryville, it's at the post office.
It's
but-
at the Alpine. Alpine.
At the subject crosswalk.
I would like to add to that, if we could, 20-mile-an-hour zone through there.
That would be lovely, but I don't think that we can
And I don't know
really
if we
do that
can,
because it
but-
is a state highway.
Yeah, well,
So why don't we try this first? Is there a second to my motion before we discuss it?
I second.
More discussion?
I'm just wondering if we can do some baseline data before installation. I'd like to add that, or can I add that? Anybody?
The baseline data being speed?
Speed, number of cars, yeah. I think they were saying,
So with the motion, you do have the monitoring recommendation incorporated in that motion. So put the light in, put the warning sign, do the monitoring, and report back to council.
Correct.
So
That's
basically,
the nature of the motion.
modified option 3.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye?
Aye. Any opposed?
I didn't say aye. Aye.
Oh. All right, John.
For the record, what was the
Thank
vote?
you. I believe it was unanimous.
yeah, except for I don't have clarity on what my request is, but yeah, aye is fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we move now to then the mural ordinance, which is for Juliana to speak about with us.
All right, thank you. So we're bringing this back for second consideration on the first reading of a proposed new ordinance on public mural reviews. This was brought to council a couple weeks back and no action was taken. And so just from some of the comments made, amendments were made to the proposed ordinance as well as some additional language in the staff report. The additional language starts at the bottom of page 79, goes to page 80 of your packets. And the suggested additions from the city attorney are on page 82 and 83 of your packets. And the question of enforcement came up, and so I sent it over to City Attorney John Kenny, and really just recommended a couple of minor additions. Like I said, to page 82, the definition of a public mural, the insert of language about no person shall create, maintain, and put in place public mural without first receiving a permit, which is pretty standard language that we have for most other ordinances. And then on the top of page 83 of your packets, just a clarification that the city of Mount Shasta does not reserve the right to withhold the right to remove a public mural on private property. So at any point, if a private property owner wants to cover up a mural, they have that right. And John Kenny said that that was the only thing that could be ruled as a taking, is if we say a taking by saying they have to keep the mural up. Right. So we do have to clarify that. But the planning department can ask to be notified within 30 days of it going down so that we can accommodate that, just for knowledge's sake. Other than that, when it came up to the discussion of enforcement as far as the conditions of the mural, the status of the mural, that the city attorney basically agreed that it's similar to our architectural design review process. When an application comes to the planning department for architectural review, they present their project, and an approval, a conditional approval or a denial is made based on that project. For example, if the planning commission approves a 10,000 square foot facility and the base of a 20,000 square foot facility is poured, the city reserves the right to red tag that development, stop that development, because that's not what was approved. And if, for example, of a mural, if someone's approved to put up a mermaid and they start painting a seagull, we have every right to go up and say that that was not the approved design, and that has to be remediated either through citation. The city can actually go in and remove the mural itself and charge that private property owner or artist, depending upon who submitted that application, or work with them to address that issue. This ordinance does clarify that if there are minor changes, for example, if someone's approved to design a mermaid with a tail that's blue and they come back and say, actually, we want it to be green, the planning director has the ability to work with that as long as it doesn't change the intent of whichever legislative body approved that. That's basically what we go through as far as other areas. There's always going to be, some difficulties. Someone may change a minor thing and we'll have to go in and ask them not to. For example, vegetation plans. When we approve architectural design review, they have to submit a landscaping plan and follow that plan. We have had people in the past not do that. And then that comes down to enforcement and citations until they comply with the original conditions of their application. At any point, they can come back to Planning Commission or, in the case of murals, it would be Planning Commission or City Council with a recommendation from beautification, how this is set up right now. At any point, they can come back and say, I've changed my mind. I don't want a mermaid. I would like a seagull. And then we would take them through the process again as if it were a new project. So that's that's what John Kenny had talked about as far as this ordinance had go. The other concern that was brought up was the best practices in adding specific language to the requirement of the maintenance plan. John Kenny had advised, what I had kind of brought up earlier about having a best practices manual with the application and encouraging mural artists and private property owners, along with artists who are putting murals onto public buildings, to follow a best practice procedure that's not in the ordinance itself, but is with the application. So again, when we consult with people on any type of project, we bring up questions and have things in the application that may not be specifically called out in the ordinance. But for example, if they're required to submit a maintenance plan and someone comes into my office with a proposal to bring to Planning Commission or to beautification based on the proposed process, if they basically say, I'm going to put it up and not maintain, we basically say that's not good enough. You're going to have to provide more information. Otherwise, it's not a complete project. It's not a complete application until you submit sufficient amount of data or sufficient amount of language about what the maintenance plan is, how many years are you going to renew it. And so beginning on page 93, this is the National Heritage, I have it written down, excuse me. It's kind of a mouthful. It's basically the Heritage Commission, American Institute for Conservation of Historic and Artistic Works Mural Best Practices. I've pulled this out before, but basically it's just a list of best practice questions that we would put with the application and say, run through these questions and make sure you understand what's going on. what's the timeline. It takes them through maintenance, it takes them through all these different things about wall selection. It gets into a really high level of detail that we don't typically put into our ordinances, because when it comes to best practices, those change. And every single mural proposal is going to change. We're going to have murals that are on south-facing walls that'll get more sun. We'll have murals on walls that have oil-based paints or water-based paints. And so to have a specificity into the ordinance itself almost chains us creatively. And so if you're getting the general point across, if you need to have a maintenance plan based on your situation, ask these questions, that's much easier for us to work with. So that's kind of the recommendation there, and how we can integrate some of the best practices and encourage people to put forward good applications. But adding a huge level of detail to the ordinance, one, will make our ordinance outdated as technology changes in paint, or technology changes or artistic works change each time, or we run the risk of having to just continue to renew it as best practices change. This is a little bit nicer. We do this for our sign guidelines as well, bringing up examples of this is a good sign that we would like, this is a sign that we would rather not have, and we have that. So we do highly encourage it. And again, going back to the architectural review, which is what this is based off of, we do the same thing with that, is we have guidelines based off of what the Planning Commission and City Council deem as guidelines. So I'll leave it open for questions.
Thank you. How do you all feel about entertaining comments from our Lieutenant Foster at this point, in the middle of this conversation?
I suggest that we suspend consideration of this matter temporarily and have Kyle Foster hear from Kyle Foster.
Everyone okay with that? Okay. Come on up, Commander Foster. Thank you very much for taking time at the very end of your day to give us an update on apparently the evacuation and process and traffic safety on I-5.
Absolutely, Madam Mayor. So today at 8:30, we opened up Interstate 5, both north and southbound. We still have a large evacuation zone in the county of Shasta, approximately 17 miles from just north of Riverview Drive up to Sims Road. So we have 17 miles of one lane going down either side of Interstate 5 from, again, just south of Flume Creek to Riverview Drive. So all traffic, both commercial vehicles and private vehicles, are all in the number 1 lane near the center divide. If there's a number 2 lane or number 3 lane, those are coned off and restricted solely for emergency responders, work crews, and other people maintaining the freeway. The reason I wanted to come before you tonight is I know the fire is still a very big threat to the surrounding areas. I know it's still very far away, about 12 miles, I think, from the city of Dunsmuir and a little bit more for the city of Mount Shasta, but it does still pose a very real threat. And I wanted to allay any concerns that the council may have as far as now that we have full freeway access, once again, what that would mean for the city and a possible evacuation plan. Our current plan for the city of Dunsmuir would be to shut down Interstate 5. We have the mechanisms in place again at Mott Road. We'd take it up to Truck Village and we'd shut down the freeway there. We'd actually open up near Mott Road all traffic coming northbound Interstate 5 into both the north and southbound lane where we currently have a K-rail. We'd have that removed.
We would do that if what?
If there was an evacuation in the city of Dunsmuir and a subsequent evacuation in the city of Mount Shasta. So what I'm trying to say is we would open up the entire freeway that's available to us to send all traffic northbound away from the fire. We'd utilize Lake Street as an on-ramp onto southbound, again going contraflow northbound in the southbound lanes for the western area of the city, and then again from this portion, the south part of the city, either getting on from 89 coming northbound, getting on from Lake Street, again either from going north or south, but everything's going to flow north, or using North Mount Shasta Boulevard to go north on I-5. But our traffic plan is to funnel everyone north towards safety. Our current infrastructure completely can handle all the traffic of both the cities of Dunsmuir and Mount Shasta and our freeway, whatever we have currently on the freeway, the lanes that are available to us. So we have no issues whatsoever about getting traffic through. Additional concerns right now that I want to bring forth to the council, and you guys can bring forth to your constituents, is I-5, there's a lot of distractions on Interstate 5 right now. There is still fire burning on the eastern ridge. near Gibson and Pollard Flat. It's visible from the roadway. It does not yet pose a threat to the freeway. And if your residents are driving up and down the freeway, just watch out for slow-moving traffic, looky-loos, people trying to take photos of the fire. That's a major concern of ours. And then also what you will see is you may see a potential increase in commercial vehicles carrying timber, logs, chips, and hay trying to exit through the city of Mount Shasta. We are diverting all vehicles that contain open flammable material, wooden material, off of the freeway and sending them down 89. And the reason being for that is if there is a flare-up and we start getting large embers across the freeway, we don't want anything readily ignitable and setting more fire. So we are working with Chief Mello, the fire department. I've seen him routinely at our meetings at the McLeod Base Camp with the U.S. Forest Service, and we're working with all our other allied agencies. And I can pretty much tell you that I am very, very confident for the safety of the city of Mount Shasta and the safety of Dunsmuir, should we need to take any emergency action to evacuate you or the citizens out of the region. We've thoroughly planned this, and right now, I think we have a very good plan, and we'll be able to accommodate it. Any questions?
Hi, thank you for your hard work. Question. I went down to Reading today and there was no traffic at all. Came back, there was no traffic. 55 miles an hour through a construction zone. I'm assuming that's considered a construction zone?
Yes.
I didn't see any signs.
Thank you for putting that out. We are working on signage right now. So just so you know, we had about 24 hours to implement this plan.
Yeah.
And the questions you may get from your constituents is, why did we have the freeway shut down for so long? This is almost unprecedented that we had it shut down for over 5 days. The reason being, and I can show you photographic proof, of every day up through Saturday morning, we had active fire on the freeway. So the fire's behavior is during the day, it would burn upslope away from the freeway, and at night it would reverse and come downslope and onto the freeway. And of all of us and our collaborators, this was both the Shasta County Sheriff's Department, Siskiyou County Sheriff's Department, Department of Transportation, California Highway Patrol, and the U.S. Forest Service Incident Command Group. We all bought off on this plan before we opened the freeway, and we're all that confident about the safety. Again, this fire could flare up, it could impact the freeway, but we have enough contingencies and mechanisms and equipment in place that we're highly, highly confident that we can evacuate people from those affected areas and allow firefighting operations.
I was really impressed with the amount of work going on. I couldn't count how many dozers and stuff there were out there. The other question I have for future consideration is the K-rails. And if a semi-truck has to make a U-turn on the freeway, has there been any thought given, this is a Caltrans question, but of a separation that would be safe so cars couldn't come through and have a head-on, but so a semi could make a U-turn?
I can quasi-answer that. Again, any technical data would have to be deferred to the Department of Transportation because they are the experts of that. Currently in our county, or excuse me, to be northern Shasta County, there are 2 metal pull-throughs, and Caltrans is actually getting the idea of removing those. They're only, I think, 12-foot sections that require a heavy truck and chain to pull these sliding rails along a metal rail on the K-rail. Even those that are currently in place are not big enough for a commercial vehicle to go through. And again, not getting technical, but I think Caltrans' belief on not having large-scale pull-throughs like that is in that center divide is no longer technically sound, and that if something were to hit it, this is just my speculation, I'm not the expert, is why we can't go to a greater length section. But I will bring it up with him for you. Any other questions?
How is State Route 89 doing?
Beautiful. I just drove through there from McLeod and I saw 6 vehicles.
And no concern about bringing people on emergency from McLeod for any reason?
No, so the State Route I-5 detour through State Route 89, State Route 299 caused a significant backup. The reason being is Interstate 5 in our community roughly sees approximately 20,000 vehicles a day. I don't know the number count that went down 89 to 299, but I do know at points the average reroute time was about 4 hours from the city of Mount Shasta to the city of Reading using that route. Right now, because we do have the interstate open, like I said, traffic is diminished extremely on State Route 89, and if there were a concern for that community, 1, we have all the resources there for them, and then 2, I think we'd have no problem getting them down 89.
Wonderful. Any idea how much time it takes to go on the through the 17-mile stretch? Any estimate at all?
I think right now we're only looking at probably a 20-minute increase
20
for
minutes?
southbound. Now, northbound, the true tail is going to be tomorrow. Because we did not announce the opening today, we did not, the Oregon Department of Transportation has been a wonderful partner in this process. They have signage in Oregon and everything else, and have been diverting commercial vehicles for us. So that has really reduced our commercial truck traffic into the region. We have now lifted that ban, except for those flammable loads that I spoke of. So I'm anticipating a very increased amount of commercial truck traffic that'll be traveling through the region. And then the speed on the freeway is going to be predicated by the speed of those commercial vehicles in the one lane. So going downhill, I think we'll see a 55-mile-an-hour speed for the most part, but it's going to be on that return trip coming up to Reading, where I think we're going to see speeds reduced into the 25, 35-mile-an-hour region. The good news is anything from Reading north to Lakehead is completely wide open, all those lanes, and then Flume Creek to Mott Road, where we currently have the construction detour, that will all be wide open. So we should get some traffic congestion relief in those zones, but only time will tell. So my best guess that I'm thinking about is that your northern trip could double. It could become 2-hour trip between Reading, but again, that's half the time on the best day that we're getting on 89 and 299. And I just have one more comment. Since I've been up here since January, and this is from the bottom of my heart, I cannot tell you how impressed I am with this community, the community in Dunsmuir, and just the county of Siskiyou in general. Working with all of you has been a wonderful experience, and then just all the positive feedback that I get on a continuous basis from this community. It makes our job as law enforcement just that much easier. So on behalf of the Highway Patrol, thank you, and thank you to the community of Mount Shasta.
Thank you, Kyle. Amazing series of circumstances you've inherited since coming.
Yes, it's been busy since.
Let's hope next year is a little smoother.
I'm hoping so. So,
Thank you.
thank you for taking the time. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we were asking questions of Juliana about her presentation.
One question, and Juliana, page 83 at the top, the addition. Would it be acceptable with staff if we reworded the added sentence that's in red underline to simply read, "A public mural on private property may be removed by the mural owner without the city's permission"?
I think it's better worded than this, which that's John Kenny's wording. Yeah, I'm trying to get, I think for me, yeah, I think that would be okay to use the word permission and not, yeah. I'm part of my brain wants to say the property owner's right to remove a public mural at any point instead of the word of permission, but that sounds a lot better than this sentence. So I would be fine with that. It's still the same intent. Basically, it says we can't refuse people if they want to paint over it, which is unfortunate. But
I had to read that other sentence
Yeah, a
over
couple
2 or
of
3
times.
times to figure out what it was saying.
yeah, that was, yeah.
So I just drafted something, and I proposed something that I thought would be
Yeah, I never did
easier to
figure out what it
understand.
said. I went round and round and round on that one.
Double negative.
Double negatives,
Just
yeah.
if you put the positive in, you get what it means. If you say the city of Mount Shasta reserves the right to withhold the right, then you understand it's the
Yeah,
opposite.
but that's not the case. That's not what,
Yeah,
It's the opposite.
yeah.
Yeah, I think writing it out and looking at, I think that would still be the same intent without having issue with that. But yeah, that's a much better sentence. So it's, so the wording that was proposed, I believe it does have to be a formal amendment, but I don't know if it can be friendly amended. A public mural may be removed without the city's permission.
Yeah, basically what I have is a public mural on private property may be removed
Oh, there we go.
by the mural owner without the city's permission.
Yeah.
And when it comes to action, I'll be
Okay.
making
Yeah,
that
I think that's
proposal.
a much more clear sentence.
Okay.
I had a question on the maintenance. Does it specifically say in here somewhere? If so, I've missed it. that if the mural becomes, if it's just falling apart and it's an eyesore, does it say somewhere that we can have it removed? I didn't see exactly where it said that.
Yeah, there's a couple of different languages. So non-compliance, so that's kind of the main one I was talking about. On page 84, 18.65.110, miscellaneous provisions, A is non-compliance. So it basically
Okay.
says that we can fine, penalize, or enforce provisions set forth in this chapter for failure to comply with any respect with an approved public mural review application. So I think that's basically the
Yeah.
point we would have. And then there's also language on page 35 under fines and penalties related to that. And basically, we would constitute it as a violation of this chapter in the municipal code. So we would follow the $100, I believe it's, and this may change with the proposed nuisance ordinances that are coming up, Bruce is proposing, but the current violation is, I believe, $100 per day, every day, and we can just continue to cite them, or at any point, we can go on and if there's something going on, we can go in and spend the money to amend it and then lien the property.
Thank you. Somehow I missed that. Thank
Sure.
you.
Well, I'd like to thank you for adding the language from the blah, 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 blah heritage thing. The best practices was enlightening and very thorough. A couple of process questions. One of which I've just forgotten.
It's okay.
The first of which was, so will we be issuing an RFP or something, or you would just expect an artist to come in and make a proposal when they have one?
Well, you can either do an RFP, you can just do an announcement. So for example, Beautification approved at their last meeting to put out a request for an artist to do the decorations for the fall murals. So for public murals, you do have to have some sort of process. We didn't say in here what that process is because our bidding process can be very different. But it also doesn't stop an artist from coming to the city and saying, I would like to donate a piece of work as well. I think when you start getting into the bid process is when you start talking about paying someone. So we would have to go out for a bid per our current system if we were going to pay them a certain amount of money. Mm-hmm. But if someone, say, for example, wants to donate their time and artistic ability, they have every right to do that.
Or if they've acquired a grant
Yep,
from another source.
correct.
Pay for it, I see.
Yeah, so I kept that very vague for that reason, because we could get a mural someone willing to paint a mural at any point. The other thing too, John Kenny did confirm that we have a good process with Beautification being the initial body recommending to City Council. So you have a number of public input sections, so that if someone does protest the design or someone protests the artist, they have 2 open meetings minimum to do that.
Thank you. And I remembered my second question, and that is, I think you said somewhere that we would expect to have you come back with a resolution regarding the fee we would charge for the permit? So we
That's
could
in here.
expect that?
Yep.
Okay,
That would come with the second reading.
second reading, okay. Okay, any other questions for Juliana?
Yeah, one quick question. So it'd go out to bid regardless of the value, you're saying? It would go out to bid regardless of the value of
No, so it would follow our current purchasing
the,
system.
is there a minimum?
I believe it's 5,000, we have to go out for public bid. If it's under 5,000 but over 1,000, we have to get 3 bids.
Oh,
And then if it's under 1,000, we don't have to go out for bid. I don't remember, that's not the exact numbers, I think it's like 500 and not 1,000.
okay.
But it's in our finance section of the meeting
Thank you.
code.
Okay, so this is CCO-18- oh, until the second reading, okay, thank you.
Did
So
you want
I'd
to
like
open
to
it for
open the-
public comment? Oh.
I'd like to open the public hearing. Are there any comments from the audience regarding this matter? Seeing none, I will then close the public hearing, and we can go on to more council discussion if you'd like.
I move that we move this proposed ordinance to a second reading with the amended language discussed earlier.
So we
Substituting-
approve the first reading and move move to
Move
the
this
second hearing.
move this to the second reading.
Right,
With the amendment,
with the amendment.
the second
Is it-
The
that.
amendment reads,
Okay.
"A public mural on private property may be removed by the mural owner without the city's permission."
Okay,
As
we have a-
amended, second?
We have a first and we have a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
And
Okay,
before we
that's
leave this, I'd like to
unanimous.
thank staff for providing us those guidelines, because that was very helpful. So thank you.
Okay, very good. So we'll see this on the next agenda. Okay, next, we have no outside meetings to report on. Future agenda items, any suggestions?
I don't have any suggestions. I just, what is the status of the Orchard property annexation? Is just coming to some sort of fruition?
That comes back to you on the 24th, which is your next meeting. To do what? You will have a staff report from Ms. Lucchese on annexation processes and cost.
Yep, it's, what was requested is exactly what City Manager Bruce Pope has stated, and then I received a request to also include previous reports on the Orchard annexation. I was away at a conference, and then I got sick and wasn't able to get it on this agenda, so apologize. It'll be at the next meeting.
Just a typo, item H is a repeat for item C.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So we'll remove H from the list.
Okay. I think we're rounding up on adjournment. Any difference of opinion? We're adjourning, unless there are objections. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.